Hello and welcome everyone to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Himbar, and today I have another essay video for you, but this one's going to be a little different because I kind of just want to go through it together. It's actually one I've read twice before, but I realized when I read these I wasn't taking any notes. So that's kind of what I want to go through together. But that is actually a kind of, it reminds me a lot of um, a larger book. But first off, the essay is Reading Sword and Sorcery to Make the Present Less Real by Jason Ray Carney. Came out on February 19th, 2022 in LARB, which is the Los Angeles Review of Books. And it reminds me actually of a longer work. So if you want to read like something that kind of feels like this, but focus on not just Sword and Sorcery, but on certain writers of Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and H.P. Lovecraft, you can read Weird Tales Modernity, also um, uh, by Carney. So we're gonna share my screen real quick, and here it is. So actually, at the top here we have the cover of the December 1932 issue of Weird Tales, which is where the first Conan yarn appeared. And this is not a Conan art. I do think this art is pretty good though. It's got like a basilisk up above too, where you can't see it. But anyways, and so this kind of gets into the idea of escapism. I would say it's not really continuing so much in the vein of Tolkien, but it's pretty much a similar topic, very much modernist, almost very modernist, as the book also by Carney does, or at least looking at modernism, and not modernism as in like post medieval or Renaissance or whatever, or even lowercase capital M modernism, pretty much between the wars, modernism, that type of modernism. And so it opens here with, can we justify reading fiction to make the present less real? In our modern attempts to defend the practical value of fiction reading, have we overlooked how the practice provides a valuable form of understimulation and inoculation against an illness-inducing reality? Which is those are very poignant questions, I feel like. And that's kind of where the whole thing is going to go. And, well, and he even mentions this here. It actually says there is no paucity of defenses that reframe the practice of reading fiction as a pro-social, as a responsible engagement with the real. And I get that, right? Because for me, it's kind of a lot of things are there's two sides to something for me, right? I definitely read fiction to escape from reality in some sense, right? But I also read fiction to learn things, right? Sometimes I just want popcorn, right? And he mentions this later actually in the article. He'll talk about how he read a lot of stuff that's not, like popcorn fiction or anything. Like he even mentions Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and obviously very heavy right there. Um, and but sometimes I want to get something out of what I'm reading. Sometimes I'll read nonfiction for that, or whatever. Other times I'll read more literary fiction. It just kind of depends. But sometimes I just want to read a Forgotten Realms novel. Right, that's my popcorn pretty much for me. Something for me that helps me disconnect from the world. And in his case, he's talking about Sword and Sorcery as that train pretty much to get to a sense of understimulation. Right, reality is highly stimulating in of itself. We need less of that pretty much. So I'm not going to go over everything in here, but in the third paragraph, he says, whether we read to engage or to escape reality, we continue to read fiction because it provides us with an experience that cannot be satisfied by other means. Additionally, as cultural practice, reading fiction has taken on a quasi-spiritual aura. It has become a secular ritual, not unlike mindfulness meditation, that is robustly encouraged by its proponents. One recalls the Orwellian Read posters that have been published by the American Library Association since 1985. The most recent, a rendering of Channing Tatum holding a copy of Peter Pan, and yada, yada, yada. Which is fair. I mean, reading definitely has this kind of this engagement with art, but it's very, very active, right? Rather than looking at a painting or listening to music, which a lot of people listen to music, or even more so, I feel like if you're going to see someone with their earbuds in, they're probably listening to music, less likely listening to an audiobook or something like that. So it definitely has that kind of sense about it. But it's an interesting sense, right? It's very active, like I said. Definitely not the in that sense, I feel like maybe because it has a smaller group of people that read, um, it has less, there's more people that play video games, right? There's more people who play or watch television or movies or whatnot than read books, right? I think you'd be hard pressed to find an American who hasn't seen a movie in a year, but you could be very hard pressed in some cases to find an American who's read a book in a year. So, anyways, he kind of goes into this is a pulp scholar, so he goes into pulp stuff a bit. And he touches on a lot of different things. But here it says, can certain types of fiction direct our attention to either the real or the unreal? Do we read literary fiction to engage the real? Do we read pulp fiction to escape the real? That's kind of what I just said. So he's asking me, I guess, does advocating for an activist form of fiction reading ignore the escapist potential of the practice? Does it discount the unique mental health value provides to a certain reader who needs to escape a horrible present? And that bit actually kind of reminds me of Monsters and Monster Lovers by Fritz Leiber. Presentation he gave at some con, I think, but you can read it in essay form in certain places. And he kind of talks about that too, and it's mostly in the vein of people like monsters, so they're interested, right? But you didn't really see people in Nazi Germany, writing about like fantastical stories about monsters because maybe it was too real in that sense. But I think it is an interesting thing here. Personally, for me, I want both in my fiction for the most part, right? Like I read Ed Greenwood, and he's very popcorn. For example, I read Elman's Daughter recently. It's right here, and but it still got me teary eyed at a certain point because he has certain points that I feel like that are still powerful, even though it's largely just entertainment. I'm not going in there hoping to learn anything or to re-examine myself so much by the end of it. But when I write myself, so I know this is a little slightly different because it's not reading. When I write, what I want first and foremost is the reader to be entertained. That's what I want, right? That might be this escape thing. It might be the escape. It might be the get away from reality. It might be the de-reify, whatever. But I also would like it to be more in depth, right? Not going to say I just throw in a bunch of symbolism. Because that's a whole different topic, or anything like that. But I want there to be more, so if a reader is going to be astute or pay more attention or reread or whatever, that there is more there, right? That might be the reify, that might be the stuff there to become more proactive, right? The people being more proactive need to actually be more proactive, right? To get the something out of it besides just entertainment, which in and of itself I feel like is easier potentially to get. I think it kind of depends, but so we're just gonna move further along here, though. It says a myopic view of fiction reading risk obscuring the fact that certain pulp genres, such as sword and sorcery, the forte here of Carney, are designed to provide understimulation, mental oases to insulate our sensorium for the present. Robert E. Howard, or for Robert E. Howard, the inventor of sword and sorcery, interwar modernity was an illness-inducing assault on the sensorium, and his invention was designed to make the horrible present less real. I believe he goes in to talk about the present. Yeah, he talks about here. Says the kidnapping and murder of the 20-month-old Charles Lindbergh Jr. in March fell like a gossamer layer of sorrow over the whole Western world. Homeless camps or Hoovervilles occupied by the forgotten and downtrodden sprouted up everywhere. In the very capital of the American Empire squatted the Bonus Army, a group of war veterans demanding economic relief. The Dow Jones average reached its lowest recorded level during the Depression years, and in June 1932, the Nazis became the largest party in the German Reichstag, cementing the fate of the Weimar Republic. Right, that's right when Howard is writing this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and you can tell even in his, I believe it talks about. We get this quote from the Phoenix and the Sword, which is a great quote. But I will not share right now. And we also get his look at post Oaks and Sandroffs, which is kind of Howard's modernist, more realism, I would say, look. And how he doesn't really grasp it, that reality here, is a horrible present, right? It's not a nice thing, right? And so you could say this Conan stuff was an escape from that, right? And I mean, you can see that, and he mentions the Mirrors, Twos, and Dune, actually, which may be my favorite Howard story, and talks about wariness, right? And I could see that, right? And it makes sense with this author as well, as Robert E. Howard committed suicide when he's rather young. So this present of his was not very enjoyable, right? And so then he turns much more personal, talking less about other things and connects it more to himself. Carney does at the end here. You can just go read this yourself. It's free to read. You don't have to subscribe to anything. And I will link this below. But he mentions some classic stuff to read, which I can recommend all of these things he lists here. And he also mentions some modern stuff like David C. Smith, Howard Andrew Jones, Scott Odin, right? So I can recommend again all those authors as well, or other books, right? Like like Flame and Crimson, which is one I've done a fantasy essay actually on a chapter from that book before. So, and then again, he goes into that stuff that some of it I mentioned earlier, like talking about his man search for meaning. But let's read this last paragraph, and then I'll call it good there. It says, these dramatic shifts in fiction reading over the past year and a half. This is right at kind of the tail end of COVID, and it was February, I think, of 22. I said this came out, and that was actually, for example, when I was on campus, was the month that the mask mandate went away. Like, it no longer was required for you to wear a mask on campus. But anyways, so that's the time period. I'm sure we all remember it. The dramatic shifts in fiction reading over the past year and a half happened below the threshold of consciousness. I'm only now taking stock of this. Surprisingly, a passage from Frankel's account helps make the pattern comprehensible. Speaking about the extent to which certain types of people over others were prone to survive the camps, Frankel writes, sensitive people who were used to a rich intellectual life may have suffered much pain. They were often a delicate constitution, but the damage to their inner selves was less. So they were able to retreat from their terrible surroundings to a life of inner riches and spiritual freedom. Only a political opportunist would seriously compare the millions who were murdered in Nazi concentration camps to the millions who died by contracting COVID-19, but Frankel's observation was a lance of light. Reading fiction can inoculate the self from the covert toxicity of an illness-inducing present. Perhaps like prayer or meditation, Sword-and-Sorcery and escapist fiction more generally is a form of self-negation of transcendence. Justifiable or not, it is a modern attempt to make the present less real. I like that he focused strictly on Sword and Sorcery here. This is something that could get very broad very quickly, and I appreciate that. You know what I mean? Like it reminds me of the Tolkien's. Is it even Tolkien? I think it might even be Le Guin. Whichever one mentions. Well, they both have very similar thoughts. So if you look on Fairy Stories or Le Guin's similar essay or similar comments, I can't remember. Someone tell me. No, but about a man in prison, wanting to escape it, right? Rather, he's going to still physically be in prison, but wanting to escape that reality type of thing. And so that definitely comes like that's a good thing. I mean, like I'd be hard pressed to say, like, I don't know why the top part is doing that, guys. I apologize. I'm sure that's obnoxious because it's bothering me. I feel like as a reader, right, I've already stated this, that it's good to escape sometimes, right? As a writer, even, like normally for me, the stuff I like to write is when I've like been getting like hammered emotionally and to get it off my chest, right? Get it away, right? And in that sense, it's cathartic. But I think reading can also give you that sense of release, right? Makes the things that are tough and concrete, that are painful, you can make it go away in a sense, right? Make it more abstract for a minute. You can enter a different world in this case of like Sword and Sorcery. And, like heck, my work week was garbage last week. This video will be coming out much later than where I am recording this, and my weekend as well for that before my work week even began was terrible. Like my car broke down, my water heater broke down, other things were not going well, right? And so it was nice, and it was very nice to be able to go and read some things. And that was actually right around the day of mine, so I read some Sword and Sorcery. All right, so I can agree with Carney in this case, and he makes it seem very smart, astute, a literary scholar away, rather than just like a layman's attempt at giving us some relief here. So, anyways, go and read this. I'm reading my copy of Weird Tales of Modernity now, so it's in the other room where I was reading. So, or else I'd hold that out. But anyways, Carney is a great voice, I feel like, to have for sword and sorcery, or for genre fiction in general. I wish there was more people like that. So, anyways, Liam from Liam's Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.